What is this bullshit about holding the line? Weren't we supposed to be getting that final entry on the Road to Baldur's Gate 3 series? Yes, well, it's not my fault that this game is so freaking long, and that it took me ages to decide which was the best beard, before I ditched the whole idea and went for a, deeper character. But enough of that, you will have your final entry on the Road to Baldur's Gate 3 series soon enough. And the faster you click on that big bright red subscribe button, the faster you'll get it. I'm well aware that you guys might be under the impression that I am a bald dwarf with a bushy beard and the demeanor of a seasoned, level-headed medieval war veteran, but I am not. I'm human, and as such, I have weaknesses, you know? Like guilty pleasures. Stuff that I have a soft spot for that I would absolutely deny if asked in public. But Alex, you like tattoo? That's not true, there is no proof of it. Why do you have that god-awful movie, Just One of the Guys, still on your hard drive? No, I don't. What's this NBA 2K16 game? Do you still play this shit? Someone gave it to me, okay? I just have forgotten to uninstall it. And when it comes to video games, if you have been following along, you know that there are things that are guaranteed to score cheap victories with me. Things that, in my eyes, elevate the average run-of-the-mill game to the status of, it's actually pretty cool, right? Right? And today we are here to celebrate one of my very favorites. So grab your weapons, hole up in that trench, and get ready to hold the line. As we revisit the glory of our finest hour, that last-minute desperate defense of our stronghold, that apex moment in which against all odds, we turned the tables on the invaders and saved the day by keeping the bastards out of our fortresses, camps, and cities. But before we jump into the top 10, a few notes on the criterion being used are in order. First, no stacking, sir. Yes, there are actually franchises that have had us defend our place in more than one game, and some even did it in the same game. Second, there are some absolutely amazing hold-the-line moments in games from other genres, but we are going to keep this list in our turf. In order for an episode to be illegible, it must have been you who actually held the line, not your, cutscene you. Also beware minor spoilers for the following games. So without further ado, here's our list. Defend Your Town, Champions of Norrath. Champions of Norrath is a decent little action RPG. Another Diablo 2 pupil with no major pretensions, other than being a very rare case of, well, being an action RPG for the PlayStation 2, and that's a pretty impressive merit all on its own, but Champions of Norrath was not particularly original or interesting, but man, it certainly knew how to make an early impression. Just as you are done choosing your character's class and gender, you immediately find yourself in the thick of battle. And these guys aren't fucking around. Man, I'm barely learning how to move around and attack, get off me. But the game really pushes the envelope here. The stakes are immediately a matter of life and death. Your city's burning, and people are dying in droves. Man, this feels like being on the receiving end of a Daenerys Targaryen temper tantrum. As I said, it never really played in the same league as Diablo 2, but those initial moments still stick with me today, and I've been wishing for another game to try something like this ever since. Defend Your Barony, Pathfinder Kingmaker. So Pathfinder Kingmaker is a game that, when it works, it hits harder than the girlfriend I will tell you about in the next video. What am I talking about? I guess you'll have to wait and see, but in some departments it can also fail worse than a blue-haired land whale trying to nail that cartwheel. But one thing it doesn't botch though, is the one defining moment that launches you through that ascending action straight to the climax. And this moment comes to you in the form of a brutally hard, high-stake, defend your stronghold episode. All freaking hell's broken loose, and your stronghold is the last remaining bastion of light. The best part is that the baddies save the best for last. Holy shit, that's one big owlbear. Defend Your Camp, Siege of Dragonspear. I don't care how well-deserved the criticism of this title is. It is, believe me. But whoever came up with the idea of putting you through an episode that entailed the defense of your camp and the siege episode in Siege of Dragonspear died with honor. And for that, sir, I salute you. What makes this episode interesting is that there is some good old proper Baldur's Gating. Treasure this moment, for there are precious few moments that'll make you feel this way in this title. And what I mean by proper Baldur's Gating is that some of the decisions that you have made up until that point have an impact on the event, like which allies you're going to have at your disposal. Also, there's waves of invaders, and you get to choose which group of allies you want to take with you for each of the waves. the sense of urgency is a bit hindered, because rather than going from place to place or holding your ground throughout the entire episode, there are interruptions between waves, and there's no time limit for you to regroup and rest. But it's still a solid draw, and one of the moments that elevates this game way above its average quality. First defense of your village, Expedition Vikings.
Well, that pretty much beat the sod out of how I imagined it.
That's fucking awesome.
If there is a game that deserves a lot more than it's gotten from everyone in the gaming community, that's Expedition Vikings. But we'll leave most of the good things that we have to say about this cool little hidden jewel for another time. Within the first 5 minutes of Expedition Vikings, you have to defend your right to rule as the Jarl of your tribe in the wake of your father's death by beating the crap out of your challengers. And not long after that, you have to duel your cousin, your competent, seasoned, and battle-hardened cousin, and drop him on his ass to show him who's boss. And if all that is not enough for you to get the message that your rivals aren't about to let you just sit your ass on that chair so that you can begin to play Jarl, like some others I know, then the carnage that ensues surely will. Seeing that your family is having a hard time figuring out who's going to sit his arse on the Jarl chair, a neighboring tribe decides to seize the opportunity to invade your village and make that decision for you. This episode catches you and everyone else in your village with your pants around your ankles, so you must gather your men and the men who'd been opposing you up until that point and fend off the invaders. This hold the line moment made a couple of unequivocal statements. Story-wise, it made it clear that a Viking's life is no joke. Resources are limited and rapidly depleting, so everything and everyone's fair game. And they will look for the moment when you're most vulnerable to make their move. And none of it is personal. It truly is just business. The second statement is much more personal. By means of the episode of the desperate defense of your village, Expedition Vikings is telling you, the player, that it might be an obscure little indie game, but it's not come to your computer to fuck around. Defense of Vigil's Keep, Dragon Age Awakening. There are quite a few of these moments in the franchise, like the defense of Redcliffe in Dragon Age Origins, or the attack on the Inquisition's headquarters in Dragon Age Inquisition, which is not a favorite, let's say, but we'll get around to you soon enough, Dragon Age Inquisition. But the best hold-the-line moment in the series has to be the defense of Vigil's Keep in Dragon Age Awakening. As it happened with the defense of your camp in Siege of Dragonspear, the importance of this moment is built throughout the game. You're asked to collect resources to improve your keep's defenses. You're forced into some opportunity cost situations in which your fortress is at stake, and in the end, you have to choose between saving the city of Amaranthine or standing shoulder to shoulder with your comrades and weather the storm of the Darkspawn invasion. Should you choose the latter, you're in for a treat, an all-out Darkspawn slaughter treat, one that includes fending off waves of monsters, going toe-to-toe with ogres, and choosing from a wide assortment of badass weapons and allies. Defend your stronghold, Wasteland 3. If you have been following along, you probably know that I wasn't overly impressed with Wasteland 3. It had many good ideas and reworks of some great concepts that seem to have been forgotten. But although the first game in the series predates Fallout and served as its predecessor, Wasteland 3 feels like discount Fallout in many respects, and by the time the credits rolled, I felt like there was a good game, but it was buried somewhere within this one. But there are a couple of things that Wasteland 3 does well. One of them is the hold the line moment. The build up to this scene may be a little bit plot convenient, but it still feels somewhat deserved. And more importantly, it's fucking epic. I like that you face a large group of enemies who've taken vantage points and who've even brought armored vehicles with them. You also have a bunch of allies of your own, ones that you're going to want to protect by being efficient in your defense of your stronghold. I mean, you can half-ass it and take a bunch of casualties, but Wasteland 3 at least makes a decent enough effort to sell you that these are your recruits, your men you're likely going to have to depend on later on. Defend your stronghold, Neverwinter Nights 2. I think I've said enough times by now that Neverwinter Nights 2 was not particularly outstanding, but at its worst, it was still at least serviceable. However, it also had its fair share of awesome moments. My particular favorite is its hold the line moment. Not only is the build-up epic and the stakes high, but the action is, well, simply the best there is in the game. This hold the line episode is divided in two parts, and they are both interrupted by cutscenes, but it all works well as a whole. The action is badass and challenging, and the cutscenes help build up the stakes and gravitas. Every game has a finest hour. I might regret saying this, but if there is any truth to that statement, well, you're looking at Neverwinter Nights 2 right now. The Calrathian Rebellion, Dungeon Siege 2. If there is a game that you must cut through fast and furiously without ever paying any attention to anything that's being said, that's Dungeon Siege 2. The voice acting in this one makes the voice acting in Titan Quest sound like Oscar-winning stuff. And if you think that D&D lore is riddled with medieval fantasy tropes and cliches,
you know nothing, Jon Snow.
We're talking, find the 3 fragments of a shield, the only item that can protect you from a potential blow from the evil sword the evil character is wielding. Yes, that's the level of cliche we're dealing with here. Atrocious voice acting and terrible writing are not the only problems with this one. There's also broken combat, a broken tactical panel, generic companions gameplay and story-wise, bugs, and I could go on forever. But like a tropey WWE wrestler that all of a sudden becomes magically possessed and goes from getting his ass kicked to owning his opponent, Dungeon Siege 2 went from being the Hawkeye of video games to fucking Superman on steroids with a calrathian rebellion. Not only is the build up to this moment the one shiny exception that shattered the seemingly unending mediocrity of the writing, but the action itself is, well, nothing short of a masterpiece, really. It is fast-paced, intense, challenging, and most importantly, the fact that your allies are the David facing the Goliath of the overwhelmingly more powerful oppressor sets them as the underdog that's worth saving. And this gives you purpose, not only because they are your allies, but because no one deserves to live under tyranny. Fending off the Hydra, Dragon's Dogma, Dark Arisen. The 2016 remastered iteration of Dragon's Dogma, Dark Arisen, took care of many of the issues that kept the original from being a masterpiece. And whether or not it became a masterpiece after its reissue largely depends on who you ask. For me, it swings wildly from laughably bad to best game ever made, hardly ever stopping in the middle. But early in the game, you have to defeat a chimera as part of the tutorial, you get your heart forcibly removed from your chest by a dragon, and you fight a cyclops. And if that's not enough, while you're taking a well-deserved nap, the fort you are in gets attacked by a 3-headed hydra of sorts. Holy crap, man, how about you at least let me figure out how to use main and secondary actions first, eh? Well, guess not. So you and every other person in the fort try to stop this giant snake from killing everyone. And being Dragon's Dogma, you can kill it from a safe distance if you are a range damage specialist, or you can climb on top of it and attack its head, or you can get swallowed by it and kill it from within, like your first girlfriend did with you. Metaphorically speaking, of course. And this happens within less than 1 hour of game. I don't know if this is the game's way to tell you that it is going to be epic or ridiculously over the top, but it's awesome all the same. Being the defender party in any siege, Mountain Blade, Warband. Why are you building an army?
I don't know. Of course not.
Why are you chasing and slaughtering those poor insipid bandits?
I don't know. Of course not.
Why are you laying siege on that random castle?
I don't know. Of course not.
But
shit, that's cool.
There are those amongst the illustrious who say Mountain Blade is the best game that's ever been made. And if you don't care at all about stories, plot points, being rewarded with cutscenes and dialogues, or the game even acknowledging your actions and decisions, I can see why you would count yourself as part of this obscure group. The game's fucking awesome. There's tournaments of jousting, questing, party management, leveling, exploration, combat, trade, a shit ton of cities, and a truckload of mods that go from superficial bullshit to turning the game into freaking Game of Thrones. And at the summit of this larger-than-life mix of epic awesomeness stands the sieges. Laying siege, or better yet, defending your stronghold from an overwhelming invading army is quite simply an incomparable experience. I've probably played hundreds, no, maybe even thousands of video games. Some I have labeled masterpieces, some I have ditched in frustration or anger, some I have sank hundreds of hours into without quite understanding why, some I have respectfully bowed to and decided that they just weren't for me. And some have left an indelible mark in my memory. And as fantastic as some of those story-based moments have been, the ones that have stuck with me the most have been the product of me being at my finest hour. Like that winning bicycle kick goal I scored in the 87th minute even after one of my players had been red-carded while playing a tourney with a group of friends on Pro Evolution Soccer. Or being the last gnome standing in a 10-man raid and dishing out that final desperate shadow bolt to take down Prince Malchezaar in World of Warcraft: The Burning Crusade. Or finally flash-kicking that Pro Street Fighter 2 player at the arcade into oblivion. or more recently, snatching victory from Glitch's Maw in Desperados 3 after I managed to tackle a couple of the most difficult achievements. It's moments like this that make gaming great in my opinion, and at the top of that list, and this one, stands my defense of a fort in Mountain Blade Warband with the Game of Thrones mod Clash of Kings installed. Unfortunately, having a YouTube channel wasn't even an idea back in the days, and like every other unique moment I just narrated, it's simply not possible to reproduce. I guess a fair warning is in order now. Beware the big wheel of sweet nerdy cheese coming your way from yours truly. It was a defensible fortress at the top of a mountain, standing between two rocky cliffs that inevitably funneled invaders into a choking point. I had taken the fort from Renly Baratheon out of my own initiative in a foolish attempt to impress Stannis with my fearlessness and my resourcefulness. We fought hard and well, and when the last defender fell, even as tired and bloodied as we were, we raised our swords triumphantly. But our celebration would be short-lived. Not a day passed before a much larger enemy army decided to lay siege to the fort. Escaping was not an option. Our stronghold was as much of a prison as it was defensible under such circumstances. We were outnumbered 4-1. We made short work of most of the assailants even before they could use their siege ladders. They eventually made it to the top of the fortress, but our professional army had an edge, for it was mostly comprised of professional soldiers and seasoned veterans. The odds were overwhelming though, and we eventually had to retreat into the buildings. But with much blood, sweat, and courage, we finally managed to put their last man to the sword. Only 13 of us remained after the battle, but the day had been saved. Stannis didn't seem impressed with my world-conquering exploits or particularly interested in his new fief though, and didn't even deign to send troops to protect it. Not a day passed before yet another vassal of that sewer rat Renly marched upon us, 97 men strong, against 13 tired and injured men.
Tonight, we dine in hell!
I said out loud. My girlfriend at the time turned her eyes away from our TV to chastise me with a tired look and a grimace. But it didn't matter. We gave the bastards hell just as we had the day before. Renly's men fell like flies to our bolts and arrows, but they eventually made it to the top of the wall. I was the first one to greet them with my two-handed legendary Scottish claymore. They fell like flies, but against such numbers, even our elite band of warriors started to succumb. I alone downed 23 of them. Only 7 of us remained by the time we made our last stand under the lintel of the last room in our fortress, and only 2 of us made it out of that scuffle. 1 on each side. The clever archer who had been taking down our men, deadly but silently from the other end of the fortress, and me. I was down to my last drop of health, and I was out of ranged weapons or ammo. There was barely any cover between the archer and me, but it had to be done. So I ran in his direction from cover to cover. The last stretch was suicide. It was a 20-meter run at least, with no cover, and from that range, he would surely not miss. But I ran towards him. He had me in his aim. I thought I was a dead man for sure, but just as he was ready to release the string of his bow, I strafed to my right and fell off the wall and onto the staircase leading up to the wall. A fall not high enough to hurt me, but enough to save me from the fatal blow. I ran up the stairs like my life depended on it, for it surely did. The archer had already put an arrow on his bow and was tensing the string. But just as he was getting ready to release the string once again, the legendary Scottish claymore struck true, and that was the end of it. The most epic hold-the-line moment ever, a line that was held not once but twice. I then bravely fled the place because there was yet another army on its way, so they eventually captured the castle. But oh my, look at the time.
And I have nothing more to say to you.
If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, thank you for watching all the way up until now. If you like what you're seeing in this channel, please consider subscribing and clicking that notification bell to avoid the usual YouTube shenanigans. Share the video, but most importantly, never stop gaming, but don't let gaming get in the way of your hopes and dreams. Bye everyone.